This is the Ginger Gamer, and this is my Elden Ring review. It's a whole new world. The game that's on everyone's mind right now is Elden Ring. It's no different for this Ginger right here. My history is that I played Dark Souls 1 a few years after it came out, and I was eventually captivated by the status effect of fromsoftware games. After Dark Souls 1, I picked up Dark Souls 2. It's still the least favorite in my series, but I played through it anyways. Then came Bloodborne, and after the initial difficult section, I fell in love with the fair but difficult formula that these games are known for. I beat Bloodborne multiple times. It's still the only one I got all the trophies for. When Dark Souls 3 came out, I loved it as well, as it started to have more creature comforts, and you could tell they were further refining their now practically perfect gameplay loop. Then there was Sekiro, which was sort of a departure, sort of a hybrid, and much more rhythmic based. I think probably one of the most difficult games they've ever put out. So why is this series that was birthed out of a niche group of gamers who were excited to conquer a game that not everyone could handle now selling upwards of 12 million copies? Exploration that's worth your time. When I try and describe to people why they should play these games, one of the first things I bring up is the sense of exploration. Besides maybe Breath of the Wild, there are no other games that send you out with no quest logs or waypoints to light your way. It's entirely up to you. There's also no filler in these games, meaning that every nook and cranny are worth exploring because they were handcrafted with purpose. That is not something that you can say about other bloated open world games with miles and miles full of repeated textures with nothing of value if you step foot there. In Soulsborne games, that extra step into the unknown may lead you to a weapon, a talisman, ring, spell that might just be what you need to complete a task, or more importantly, to more easily tackle the next boss encounter. One of my concerns when Elden Ring was first announced as being open world was that special interconnected world we have come to expect would be treated more like what we are used to with open world games. Thankfully, I was pleasantly surprised that essentially, we now have a specially crafted, intricately woven, gigantic world that is worth exploring. As I opened the first door and saw all that was accessible to me, I was invigorated as I've come to be when I start these games. Through my 200 plus hours of exploring, fighting, failing, overcoming, and leveling up to eventually be the Elden Lord, I believe that fromsoftware has outdone themselves. With each new game, they have been able to craft worlds worth exploring, and Elden Ring is the pinnacle of what they have done so far. Some welcome new upgrades. One of the new and very welcome additions is the Stakes of Marika. Essentially, they are optional save spots outside of the normal grace save points. What makes them so vital is that typically more now than ever they are right by boss fights. If you have played these games, you know one of the worst things was not just fighting a boss, but running for 5 minutes just to get to them to die instantly. This is huge as the bosses are tough on their own, and being able to get right back to them helps with the fatigue that this game can be associated with. We now have a map. Something that is helpful is a map that unlocks as you find small pieces of it. When it's all said and done, it's gigantic, and I like how it unfolds. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Refine it. If you have any history with these games, you know the combat is the meat and potatoes of any fromsoftware game. However, if this is your first game, then let me explain that outside of Ghost of Tsushima, this is the best melee and magic combat in the business. There are uncountable amounts of weapons, most are viable and fun, and in many instances, entertaining to use on your foes. This is something that they have certainly refined over the years, from Demon Souls through Dark Souls and now to Elden Ring, which is the best it's ever been. Here's how it works. You start with a weapon, and for instance, I started as a samurai. And if I wanted, which I did, I kept my starting katana all the way through in-game, by leveling up my stats as well as the katana itself. Now I have more than 200 melee weapons alone at this point, and there are a few I change out depending on the enemy type or boss weakness. The sound of steel clashing while rapidly attacking or stunning an enemy is truly satisfying, and let's not forget that special sound you hear when you know you finally vanquished your foe. This is one of the coolest things about the Soulsborne series, is if you pay attention, and read your item descriptions or research your next nemesis, often you can counter whatever poison or extra bleed effect or spell that could otherwise be a huge roadblock to your next victory. Learn the enemy's patterns and triumph in your path of glory. You've got a friend in me. You know that feeling when you didn't know what you were missing out, but now that you have it, you can't live without it? That is the Mount in Elden Ring. He is one of the very few things that is not actively trying to kill you. I cannot imagine going forward not having a best friend in the next decaying world fromsoftware crafts for us. The Mount magically forms right under you, and on top of that he can double jump. There are also specific places that allow you to scale large cliffs you could otherwise not traverse. I love this guy, and it's not just for travel. When fighting bosses in open worlds such as dragons, your steed is vital in your fight to take down the many dangerous and intimidating enemies in the game. Another very important new component is the Spirit Ashes. How they work is first you must find them like everything else. This benefit has to be earned. At this point I don't have all of them, and I have about 60 to choose from. How they work is using it in your gear just as you would your healing items. They typically take FP, but sometimes they take your health. Then at that point, depending on how leveled up they are, they fight with you, and they are typically available for bosses. It is important to note that these cannot be used in all areas of the game, and this is true for your mount as well. I really like this, however. I typically play alone and like to conquer the bosses on my own. Essentially, they act as a distraction, and when fully leveled up can take out some bosses on their own. It is nice to have friends. This ain't no baby Souls. I have heard some people say that this is the most accessible Soulsborne game to date, and some are equating that to the game being easy. I cannot stress enough that it is not true by a long shot. Accessibility and the difficulty of a game do not always go hand in hand. While there are helpful additions in this game, anyone who's played it and walked straight to the Tree Sentinel will tell you it ain't easy. What the game does offer more so than previous titles are options to overcome the difficulty. In all of the other titles in the series, typically there's trial and error with where to go. You might have been destroyed in the 3 out of 4 optional directions you could go, but eventually you find your way. In Elden Ring, there's always somewhere else to go and level up with enemies that are more easily dispatched with the current stats and gear that you have. Also, certain sites of grace will have directions attached to them, and it's designed to keep you on the critical path, especially if this is maybe your first time. Also, your mount helps a lot as well. Other than that, these bosses are some of the most aggressive and damaging to date. My favorite bosses outside of the main ones were all the dragons. The dragon fights are mostly dynamic, and the dragons are very intimidating, especially and even at higher levels, as they can easily end your life with one bite, tail swipe, or breath of fire. So while there are many more avenues to succeed, you still aren't going to breeze through this game. But are there any negative status effects? Or is the game perfect? I know I may have led you like Patches to believe this is the perfect, most epic game, and while it is now my favorite of the series, so much so that I cannot tear myself away from playing it, there are some valleys within the mountainside. Fall damage is all over the place, even with boosts like Cotton Feet or even a special talisman. They won't always save you. There seems to be some inconsistency for what will kill you. Along with fall damage is the air boosts that exist only in specific areas, and they never are in the area I wanted them to be. Repeated bosses or mini-bosses, for instance the Crucible Knights or the Godskin Apostles, I got kind of sick of them after the 4th or 5th time that I fought them. Sometimes they were together, sometimes they were one after each other, sometimes they were alone. Speaking of bosses, there are some cheap stun lock deaths throughout the game that are in every Soulsborne game to some extent. But I guess due to the size of the game, there are just more here. You got your poison swamps or your scarlet rot swamps. You know, that's just a given at this point with these games. You just have to get through them. Still, there's no such thing as a perfect game, but there are games like these which do so much right. I just can't put them down. Elden Ring does a tsunami of things right and about a 5-foot pool wave of things wrong. So it's as good as it gets for a game in my opinion. So the question is Elden Ring the one ring for you? That's the question, right? At this point, they've sold over 12 million units, if not more. People who have never heard of FromSoftware are stepping into this dangerous world for the first time and trying their hand at fate. Why are they taking the leap? Maybe it's the open world. Maybe it's because everyone's talking about it. Maybe it's a bit of both. I have found that people who are first-timers are overwhelmed but they are giving it their best shot and they seem to really enjoy it and want to talk about it, as there is really nothing else like it. So if you have never tried a Soulsborne, should you try Elden Ring? And to that, I say yes. Give it a try. Know that it is not supposed to be easy, but for the most part it's fair. Also, you must give it time. You start out purposefully weak, and everything is difficult, but if you put the time in, you can become the Elden Lord. Embarrassing a boss on your second playthrough that made your life a living hell is priceless. Elden Ring gives players the chance to really explore and be genuinely surprised by what they find. That and the sense of accomplishment that you get when you beat a seemingly insurmountable adversary. There's really nothing else like it in gaming. Go out and become the Elden Lord. Thanks for watching my review of Elden Ring. Ginger out.